Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will fight with its fingernails if the US withholds offensive weapons ahead of Israel's Rafah offensive.
Amazing efforts. But I think
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he hopes to overcome disagreements with US President Joe Biden over Israel's invasion of Rafah, stressing Israel's need for precision weapons to avoid civilian casualties in Gaza.
I've known Joe Biden for many years.
Biden said that he would not supply offensive weapons that Israel could use to launch an all-out assault on Rafah, which Israel claims is the last major Hamas stronghold in Gaza. Senate Republicans are slamming President Biden's decision.
For you again and again. Now, withholding weapons makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to get American hostages back and Israeli hostages back because you're incentivizing bad behavior. Withholding weapons makes Iran stronger, not weaker.
Pentagon spokesman Pat Ryder told reporters in a press briefing that as we assess the situation in Rafah, we made the decision to pause this one shipment.
Again, as I highlighted, a final determination has not been made on how to proceed with that shipment, but specifically...
An estimated 80,000 Palestinians are attempting to flee the overcrowded Rafah, thrown into panic and chaos by Israel's seizure of the nearby border crossing with Egypt and as the possibility of a full-scale invasion looms. Displaced and exhausted Palestinians and their families have packed up their tents and other belongings from Rafah and will move on.
Police detained over 30 people in the Dutch capital after breaking up a pro-Palestine demonstration. Protesters erected barricades and blocked several venues at the Amsterdam University. Footage from the scene shows some of them confronting the police and getting beaten with batons before being cleared off. Scuffles and arrests took place also at the University of Vienna. Students erected a tent camp inside the building. They were told to leave by the police, but some of them refused, resulting in 3 arrests. Another campsite sprung up at Cambridge University in the UK, with nearly 50 tents. Protesters, both students and staff, demanded the university stop investing in companies that supply arms to Israel. They also insisted Cambridge should not accept research funding from such firms. More protests occurred in Italy, Finland, Denmark, Spain and France. Tension between activists and police continues in Georgia. There were scuffles in Tbilisi late on Thursday after the arrest of a prominent blogger. People blocked one of the capital's main avenues, resulting in the arrest of several protesters. Activists reported attacks on several government critics by non-uniformed assailants over the past 24 hours. Demonstrations have rocked Georgia for weeks amid government plans to tighten controls on private organizations receiving foreign funds. The opposition fears this would be used to quash dissent, while Georgia's security service accuses protesters of aiming to overthrow the government. A huge pro-EU rally is expected in the capital on Sunday, ahead of the bill's discussion in Parliament next week.
Polish farmers have threatened to go on hunger strike over the EU Green Deal and Ukrainian imports, which they say harm their livelihoods. The group from the National Farmers Union, Orca, were invited to the Polish Parliament by deputies from the opposition PIS and Confederation parties. The protesters said they would not leave until they met Prime Minister Tusk. It coincides with a farmers' protest in Warsaw.
Boosting the birth rate is not just an Italian problem, but a Europe-wide issue. Italy has had some of the lowest birth rates in the EU, and the country is aging at a much faster rate than other European countries. Addressing the crisis is one of the government's core policies, as well as a top priority of Brothers of Italy's EU agenda. A 2-day conference held in Rome offered the chance to discuss what is being described as a cross-party national emergency. A brief interruption by a group of young activists who attacked the government's anti-abortion measures shows how very politically divisive the debate on this matter still is. Organisers stressed that a private institution was behind the event and not the government.
È un problema che non tocca una componente politica, una categoria di persone, tocca tutti. Per questo noi insistiamo sul tema trasversale. Questo è un tema che riguarda destra, sinistra, centro, bianchi, neri, verdi, immigrati, non immigrati, anziani.
Experts say that if the trend continues, Italy's population of 59 million could fall by almost 1 million in 2030. According to recent data released by the Italian National Statistics Office, the average number of children per woman has dropped from 1.24 in 2022 to 1.2 in 2023. An aging population causes problems both to the pension and the healthcare systems.
Una delle peculiarità del nostro paese è la persistenza di questo calo della natalità. Dal 2008 a oggi consideri che abbiamo perso 200.000 nati. I 2/3 in realtà sono dovuti al fatto che mancano i potenziali genitori. Proprio perché per questa protratta denatalità non sono nati 30 anni fa.
In 2023 alone, the government allocated around €1 billion for measures aimed at helping women cope with motherhood and work.
La sfida è enorme, siamo di fronte a un fatto epocale per tutto il mondo occidentale. Bisogna ingaggiare l'Europa, convocare per esempio una conferenza intergovernativa tra tutti i primi ministri.
Opposition parties claim the government should do more to increase fertility rates, with experts saying that the latest budget doesn't include enough measures to tackle the problem. But many agree on one thing. In the last few decades, governments have failed to build a strategy to address Italy's demographic decline, or at least to prevent the country's birth rate from falling further. Giorgio Orlandi for Euronews in Rome.
No surprises, Chad's interim President General Mohamed Idris Déby Itno has been declared winner of the country's presidential poll. He secured an overwhelming 61% of the vote, far ahead of his nearest rival Prime Minister Succès Masra, who got 18%. Déby Itno seized power 3 years ago after his father, who spent 3 decades in power, was killed apparently on the battlefield fighting rebels. As gunfire erupted in the capital, Masra has contested the results, which were announced more than 10 days early.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un attended the funeral of the country's propaganda chief, a figure South Korean press often likened to Nazi Germany's Joseph Goebbels. Kim Ki-nam, who played a major role in building personality cults around the country's 3 dynastic leaders, died earlier this week at 94, according to state media. He became the Propaganda and Agitation Department Deputy Director in 1966 and worked with the government for a subsequent half-century. North Korea's official Korean Central News Agency said the former Workers' Party Central Committee Secretary devoted his all to the sacred struggle for defending and strengthening the ideological purity of our revolution. Outside the peninsula, however, Kim Ki-nam will be remembered for authoring the country's political slogans during Kim Jong-il's repressive regime.
Putin reappointed a low-profile technocrat as Russian Prime Minister in one of his first moves post-inauguration. In line with Russian law, Mikhail Mishustin submitted his cabinet's resignation on Tuesday when Putin was inaugurated to his 5th presidential term. He had already been the Russian Prime Minister for the last 4 years. Most cabinet members are expected to keep their jobs following Putin's inauguration. However, the fate of Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu remains uncertain. One of Shoigu's top associates was arrested last month on bribery charges. That man's arrest was widely interpreted as an attack on Shoigu and a possible precursor to his dismissal, despite close personal ties with Putin.
Je suis au nord de la Pologne, où plusieurs nations sont réunies pour l'un des exercices de l'OTAN monté en puissance dans la région depuis le début de l'invasion de l'Ukraine par la Russie. Un conflit dont la Pologne craint plus que jamais les débordements et qui relance la question de la capacité de l'Europe à assurer sa propre défense.
Jeżeli już będzie się palił grunt pod nogami dla Putina i już on będzie tą wojnę przegrywał, czy atomem zacznie się bawić?
Jeżeli nie zażegnamy tego konfliktu, tej ostrej wojny, która dzieje się przy granicach Polski, ale też Litwy, Łotwy czy Estonii, to może okazać się, że wkrótce będziemy mieli do czynienia z dużo większym zagrożeniem i to zagrożeniem dla każdego europejskiego kraju.
The risk maybe not in this year or the next one, but in 5, 7 years, I think the invasion in our country is very real.
Nie chcemy, żeby Rosja znowu podbiła Europę. My będziemy pierwsi, którzy zaczniemy jej bronić.
Euronews. The news.